in what capacity did you want to be involved in entertainment?
I think I had this like Edie Sedgwick fantasy because I was like a teenage drug addict, and I'm 30 now. I grew up on like The Simple Life. I loved cocaine when I was in high school.
Yeah,
and
you've
like
been sober since you were
I've been
really
sober
young,
for 10
right?
years this year.
Wow,
and
congratulations.
Thank you. And it was like I started like smoking pot and drinking when I was 11, so I had like a good like 10-year chunk of using, and now like I've been sober for almost as long as I was using for, which is a really weird place to be in because I feel too young to be this old kind of feeling, if that makes sense.
I think that's how life goes.
That is how life goes.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I had this like glamorization of Hollywood and like fame and celebrity, and growing up in the South, like it was also the period of time like Gossip Girl was on, and I just had this like I had this idealized version of New York City in my head, and I could do a lot of different things and play a lot of different parts, which I think is just like in sort of addict culture, if you will, inherited like that. But ultimately, I knew that I wanted to work in television and film. I was willing to do basically anything for drugs and alcohol for many years. I would say from like 17 to 21, those 4 years were really, really, really bleak, dark years. And I really couldn't figure out the way out. And my first husband and I had just started dating in end of 2012. And I think because I was exhausted. And I felt like life had to be more than what it was. I was tired of disappointing people. I was tired of disappointing myself. I was tired of being really hungover, of calling my mom, having a panic attack, thinking I was going to have a heart attack because I had been up for 4 days. I was just tired of that. And I couldn't get off the roller coaster, and I kept trying. I remember Peter, my ex, just asked me, was like, you do drugs, that's cool. No shame. You just don't seem happy. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, you just... like, I know people who do drugs and like they seem like pretty happy, and like whenever I'm with you and you're using, and he didn't use those terms. He was like, whenever you're like partying really hard, like you just seem really unhappy and like you always regret it. And I was like, yeah, well, because I do. And he was like, so then why? And it was the first time someone approached me with love and compassion and curiosity, as opposed to like shame, guilt, like, I'm never going to talk to you again. There weren't consequences on the other side of this question. It was just like laid out for me.
When did you know that you were trans?
Like when I was 6. People would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up as a kid. And I was like, I want to be a girl. Like, I want to be a princess. I want to be a girl. I want to be an actress. Like, everything was really feminized. And my parents, bless them, were just like, okay, we have like a weird kid, like cool, but like they didn't know what trans was. I think.
When did you come out as gay?
When I was 14.
Okay. So young, and your family was accepting?
Totally.
That's
good.
good.
And I felt really, I mean, growing up in Georgia, that is not always the case, but I kind of knew that would be okay. And at that point, the idea of transitioning wasn't even on my radar, right? Because it just was so repressed from childhood. Ultimately, it gave me a lot of gender euphoria. For as much like hate and bigotry as I faced during that time and continue to face for being a trans person who is not, I am not like I haven't had any work done. I'm pretty much the same person as I was before. Just like I grew boobs and like am more myself and just more confident and more creatively fulfilled. And older, but ultimately, like, I'm a trans person who appears trans. Like, I'm not super passing in whatever that even means. But I felt really euphoric in that.
You're saying basically it felt affirming in the way that maybe you think other transparent people experience around surgeries or...
No, I'm saying like I am a trans person who like very much appears trans in public and am publicly known as a trans person because of being a known person prior to transitioning in publicly. And I would say like those photos were some of the first photos where I ever saw myself, is what I'm trying to say. And that part of the gift of doing what we do and what I do for a living is that it was the first time I done a photo shoot since transitioning. It was the first time I ever had like full femme glam and like my stylist at the time I had been working with for many, many years before came, and it was the first time I had a fitting in like women's clothing, and it was the first time for all of that. And I remember looking at the monitor on the day and being like, that's me. Like, it was the first time I felt like I saw myself reflected in my work.